Welcome to Mind Training and Homotherapy, a podcast that explores ideas to help you live a life that is more purposeful, intentional, and fulfilled. I am your host, Dr. Henry Gregory, and I thank you for tuning in. Hello, folks. Happy rainy day in the beginning of December. Hope everyone's doing well out there. Today, I'd like to talk about a subject that most of us have some experience with, concerns about, aspirations about: relationships. Relationships. You know, there's an old song by the Beatles. It says we get by with a little help from our friends. We are social creatures, and relationships mean a lot to us. It's where we get our support, a lot of validation, affirmation, and even growth challenges. Relationships are very important. One of the things I'm noticing is that in these days and times, a lot of folks are, how should I say it, seem not to be doing mating relationships. They are challenging. They require us to grow, to be open and flexible in ways that may be challenging at times. And then we also have relationships with family and friends, whether they're children or with parents, siblings, friends. We have all of these relationships. But part of the part that's not so obvious, that all of these relationships mirror a pattern of relationships. Each one of us has a pattern, a way we deal with relationships, whether they are mating relationships or relationships with our children or parents or friends or co-workers. And they all basically mirror the primary relationship, the relationship with self, the relationship with self. We all do better in relationships with other people when we have good relationships with ourselves. So what does it require to have a healthy relationship pattern? One that we can grow in, one that we allow to teach us, to facilitate our maturity. Because to me, nothing really facilitates maturity more than relationships. Again, mating, children, etc. They challenge us to go deeper, to become more skillful, to be more open, to be more honest. So what does it take to maintain good relationships? Well, first it takes some trust. Some trust. And when I say trust, I'm not necessarily meaning trust that the other person will do what you want them to do all the time. That's not how relationships work. I'm saying trust in your ability to handle whatever goes up or down in relationships, that you can maintain your integrity, still focus on your values, and perform in a way that is consistent with your standards. Trust. And of course, we develop trust by doing what we say we're going to do and not doing what we say we're not going to do. Starting with ourselves, if I say that I'm going to accomplish this today or approach that today and I do it, then I am developing more trust in my ability to be consistent, to follow through, to manifest. But if I say things and don't do them, then that sabotages my ability to trust myself and thereby makes it more difficult for me to trust other people. Mm. So then I may be on hyper alert, hypersensitive, or even feeling injured or taking advantage of it at times because the trust is not at the level that is sufficient. So healthy relationships require trust. They also require patience, because one of the things we all have in common is, well, most of us at least, we're human. And human means we don't develop in straight patterns all the time. We make a little progress and we go back the other way. Another challenge comes and like that. So when we can be patient, again, with ourselves, when we can be accepting of who we are and how we are, I'm good at this and I'm not so good at that. My child is competent in this way, a little challenged this way. My mate is real dependable this way, struggles in this way. When I have patience with the growth process, with the person, with the process, that helps because, again, that provides support. And we all need support. If you look at developmental theory around attachment, those of us who get nurturance, support, affection, acknowledgement early in life, in the womb, and as infants and like that, have a tendency to be more secure in our attachments as we grow up. Those of us who may not get the attention that we need for whatever reason, will grow up a little more insecure in relationships and will have a little more work to do in really becoming grounded in our relationships with ourselves and other people. So that patience becomes real important, real important. Another thing that's big is empathy. Empathy. Empathy is the process of understanding from the other person's perspective. It really requires us to drop our agenda and to go into the other person's world and see things from their perspective. Doesn't mean that we give up our perspective, but that means we make the effort to understand from that person's perspective. And that understanding always tunes us into what is important to that person, how they perform, how they perceive things, and gives us more knowledge in how to respond to that person in a healthy way. Whether we agree with their perceptions or not is immaterial. We can be agreeable, we can be supportive without agreeing. So empathy is real important. It really helps to validate us. We all have a need to be heard. We all have a need to be understood, I mean, your child does something that you consider dangerous or out of the box or whatever. It's and you may have some consequences for that child. But if you can start with some empathy, trying to understand it from his or her perspective, that is validating, that is empowering, that helps them to be more secure. there still may be consequences, but you're at least saying, I'm going into your world, understanding what you were dealing with, even if I prefer you to deal with it another way. And again, what that requires is that requires a level of investment. That requires us to drop our agenda and really be open to seeing things a different way, to a different perspective. Mm-hmm. Another piece that works in relationships is affection or interest. Just being able to show the person you're in relationship with that you care about them, that they're important to you, and the truth of the matter is all of us are not good at that, expressing, how should I say, vulnerable emotions. And again, that's not about the other person, that's about us. But it is so helpful when we learn how to let other person know that we appreciate them, that we recognize what they're trying to do, that we at least aware of and try to support their interests as much as makes sense to us. So that way we support, validate, encourage, and build faith in the relationship. And again, that starts with self. That starts with self, about nurturing ourselves, doing self-care. What's the saying? Above all, to thine own self be true. You can't give somebody something that you don't have. And it's a setup to try to get your validation, your happiness, your sense of self from somebody else in the relationship. That's a setup. So you are obligated at some level to do things to help you feel good about you. Healthy things. Now you can you can do things that aren't healthy, but they usually have a price tag on them and they take you the other way very shortly. They're just short term. But I'm talking about doing things that help you to relax, to rest, to go deeper, to have some joy in your life, to envision the possibilities that you value in the world. So it's like feeding yourself. And before you can feed somebody else, you have to feed yourself. And that's mentally and emotionally. You have to feed yourself before you have enough to really give somebody else. And if you're not feeding yourself, you may be trying to get your nourishment from the relationship. And that's really not fair to you or your partner or your child or whoever you're in a relationship with. Another major theme for relationships is flexibility. Flexibility. I've said it before. To me, flexibility is the core, the foundation of mental health. Flexibility means I'm willing and able to adapt, to adjust, to change as life requires me. And life requires all of us to change. We say the one constant is change. So flexibility says I can shift from what I'm comfortable with, the way I'm used to doing things, and move through my discomfort to something that I'm not familiar with, a new behavior when I see value in that. I move to a new. So flexibility says I can adapt. I may not like what's happening. There's a storm, or emotional storm, or financial storm, or whatever. But having the ability to adapt, to adjust, says, I can be okay no matter what the external situation. I may not be able to have all that I want, but I can have what I need. Flexibility is about being able to adapt. Then there's appreciation. Appreciation, gratitude. We've talked before. Gratitude is an attitude that maximizes our brain functioning. You know, it helps us to be more aware of what we have going for us rather than what we don't. One of the pitfalls in relationships is when we become critical all the time. We're looking at what's wrong, what's not happening, deficits, as opposed to what is happening. So whether you're doing that with your mate or doing it with yourself, it's not healthy. It's always good to be able to say, thank you for this, or I appreciate you doing this, or, you did a good job with that. To the other and to yourself, and to yourself. Again, in this society, we are so much into conformity and standards. We always kind of keeping each other in a box, and if you go outside of that box, that's problematic. But we're saying something different. We're saying that everybody has strengths, capabilities, contributions of some sort. If you are attracted to somebody, that's not for no reason. Now you may, a lot of relationships start because mating relationships because somebody likes the way somebody looks. They won't stay together if they're just based on that. Because you're going to have challenges. Life is a school. It always presents us challenges. So whether the challenge is you start to live together, or you start to have children, or you just spend time together and notice each other's quirks, at some level, it is about us being accepting of others, being accepting of ourselves, and adjusting and adjusting. So in real relationships, there's always room for growth. Always room for growth. My theory, and I haven't proved this empirically yet, but that if you don't have any growth that you can do because you've already done all the growing you can do, then my theory says you will spontaneously combust and disappear. There's no point in you being on the planet. So there's always work to be done. There's always work to be done. And when we talk about relationships, we're talking about working with others and getting continually better at it. Now, again, any growth means that you're going to have some mistakes. You're going to have some miscues at times, because if you're only doing the things you're competent at, you're not trying new stuff. You're not moving ahead. You're not moving forward. So when you're stretching out, that means that it's going to work better if you work together, allow room for growth in your partner and in yourself. Now, when I say allow room for growth, few of us grow at the same pace. So maybe with this particular thing, I'm moving faster than my mate. Mm-hmm. Well, it still doesn't help me to judge my mate by my pace. If I can be supportive and helpful to my mate to help them to move through it at a pace that works for them, then I'm being supportive, as opposed to being demanding, as opposed to being controlling, as opposed to being manipulative. It's about basic respect. It's about basic respect. You know, there's a difference between liking and respecting. You can like a person because you're attracted to them, but respect says you appreciate um, the way they do things and that you give honor to it and uh, acknowledge and accept it as a contribution. Hmm? So you're not trying to change your partner. You may be trying to help them to to grow, to go deeper, to manifest their strengths in a more clear way. But it's not about changing people. It's not about changing people. Again, if we want to change somebody, we look inside and say, what do I need to do different? What do I need to do better? So, that's some of the, well, a couple more I'm going to go over before we open it up. And one of the primary issues in relationships is always communication. Communication. I mean, many of you have heard of love languages. We have different love languages. One person's love language wants to hear it verbally. Another person wants to see it in terms of consistency or responsibility, or whatever. What we used to say, it's all good. It's all good. The point is, communication is about expression and it's about negotiation. So in a relationship, there's always at some level negotiating. If it's no more than what we're going to do this evening, or what time we're going to do what we're going to do, or how we're going to spend money, it's a negotiation. Hmm. Now, my experience, if you're talking about a mating relationship, you may find one partner leads in this area, another partner leads in this area, but both partners have say about what's going on, and they communicate and negotiate how they're going to do it. Things they do things together. Hmm. And that also means being able to give each other feedback in a healthy way. Actually, communication, another way to talk about communication is intimacy. Intimacy. I mean, many of us think of intimacy as just being sex, but intimacy is about sharing. It's about sharing. It's about taking down the walls, being open enough to allow that other person in, and whether we're doing that physically, emotionally, mentally, we're talking about sharing with the person that you're interacting with, that you're in relationship with, in a way that is, again, open, acknowledging, and is supportive. Now, the interesting thing is, talked a little bit about attachment styles. For some of us, depending on what we've been through in life, it may be a little challenge for us to start taking down our, our defensive walls, the walls we build up as youth to take care of ourselves. So I learned to be aggressive, or to be hard, or to be seductive in order to try to get my needs met as a child. And it goes into adulthood. Well, as we grow in relationships, every stage of relationship is going to require that we make some adjustments. So that may mean that as I'm recognizing what some of my challenges are, that I am working on them to counteract them and to grow through them. And again, that may be some direct communication with my mate. allowing that person to know what I am struggling with. I mean, they probably know anyhow, but directly, and give them the opportunity to directly support and participate. So again, to me, relationships are mainly what being on this planet is about. We're all interconnected. We have relationships with everybody else on this planet, whether we acknowledge it or not. Mhm. And those relationships reflect our relationships with ourselves. So that's where it starts, having a healthy relationship with ourselves, and then with our mates, with our family, our loved ones, and expands to our family and friends, our community, the larger culture and society in general. Okay, that's that may be a lot. What do you think, Daryl?
So if you saw me looking down and moving my arm, I'm like jotting down some notes. This is one of those where I have a few like scattered thoughts that I jotted down, and I guess I'll just try to pick a couple of them and make some sense of it. But relationships, that's a ever relevant topic, because it's one thing in life that's unavoidable. Because even if you don't have a lot of personal friendships, you still have relationships. You
Mhm.
have the relationship with yourself. You have relationships from a business standpoint, work. You may not consider these people your friends, but you have relationships with them and you
Yeah.
can't avoid it. So one way or another, the topic of relationships is always going to be relevant. So, when I'm speaking, it's not specifically of romantic relationships, but just relationships in general. And so I guess I'll start with, where you left off and what has been, the common thread throughout this episode so far. And that's the relationship that you have with yourself. And so it all, in my opinion, starts with the work that you're doing on yourself, the relationship that you have with yourself, because that dictates the lens through which you're viewing everything else.
Yes.
So if you are a person that constantly beats yourself up and holds yourself to a ridiculous standard, you're likely going to be holding others to ridiculous standards as well, because that's how you treat yourself. So that's the lens that you're viewing it through. So
Mhm.
if you don't give any room or grace, for yourself, if you don't give any allowance for mistakes and errors and imperfections for yourself, you're likely going to be doing that with other people as well. you
Mhm.
know and so that's where it all starts. How are you able to clean your lens and bring your most genuine, pure, best self to any relationship or interaction?
Mhm.
And it's something that we all have to work on. Definitely something that I've worked on personally. And it's like, wow, me doing this specific thing for myself or with myself has allowed me to see other things differently. So I wanted to start there. Go ahead.
May I just? So,
Yeah.
and when we have somebody that we particularly having some relationship issues, they bring up some real concerns or issues for us. That might be a person that we need to pay, because they are really doing a service for us by bringing up some unresolved issues inside of us.
Yeah.
So the people who irritate us the most, the situations with others that challenge us the most, are generally the ones that are the most instructive.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And so that kind of leads into another point that I wrote down, and you kind of touched on this as well when you were talking about empathy. But the way that I like to look at it in part is curiosity,
Mm,
is maintaining
mm,
a curiosity about yourself and a curiosity about others. because oftentimes we go through life wanting everyone else to understand us and get us, but are we curious about other people? So if someone is acting in a way that we don't like, are we curious about where that may be coming from? So are we willing to take a step back, take a beat, and say, ask some questions, and maybe the person may not be willing to open up and talk about it, but at least be open enough to carry the belief that something deeper may be going on that's beyond this specific moment that's causing this thing to, or influencing what's happening here. So if this person is being unfair to me, is being unreasonable, is being mean, of course you don't want to allow someone to treat you unfairly. At the same time, for your own mental health, you can think about it and say, there seems to be something else going on, because I know that I didn't, in my opinion, do anything to this person. So
Yeah.
there may be something else going on that's completely beyond me. And even if they're not in a place where they can explain it to me, I can be curious enough to allow that to be a possibility
Mhm.
and manage things that way. But if we're constantly taking things personally and making everything about us, it removes or it limits our ability to understand and create some type of meaning in the situation. If we're constantly like making it about us and what's going on in that given moment, if that makes sense.
So empathy at some level is about having compassion for the person. You may
Hmm.
not accept the behavior, but you realize that if the person is there, it's something that got them there. They're there for a reason. So they are
Hmm.
trapped in their own behavior if it's unhealthy behavior.
Right. Exactly. And so, and forgive me, because like I said, I just wrote down some random thoughts. So not all of these are completely connected. But the next thought that I had was about just being honest with yourself. And sometimes it requires you to be honest with the other person as well. But being honest about what the relationship actually is. So what do I mean by that? So for instance, I have someone who, I can consider a friend, but the nature of our friendship is really about that person's ability, or that person's liberty of dumping stuff on me. So what do I mean by that? So you have people that just need a friend to dump all their problems on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way that they look at their relationships, just someone that they can just tell all their problems to, get stuff off their chest. But what can happen in those situations, even if they don't intend it that way, is that it ends up being very one-sided, because the relationship is so much about that person being able to express themselves and have someone be there for them. There really isn't much room for that person to actually be there for the other person in the same way, because it's all about the other person. And so, in a situation like that, if you're on the receiving end of it, you have to decide for yourself and be honest with yourself as to whether or not that's fair to you, and if it's something that that you want to continue with. Because you have some people, because it's like strengths and developmental areas, you have some people that are just really good listeners. And when those people because those people are really good listeners, they have a lot of people that just want to tell them all their problems, and they just maintain that position that I'm the person that everybody comes to talk to because I'm a good listener. But the question is, in that situation, is that fair to me? Is that how I want my relationships to work? Go ahead.
Is it beyond fair? Is it healthy?
Hmm.
Relationships imply by the definition reciprocity. So
Hmm.
what I'm going to pose to you, if somebody is using relationships in a way that's one-sided, that's
Hmm.
not healthy for you or for them.
Yes.
That's not healthy, because again, relationships are about communication, that we're both having input in it. We're both negotiating what we're doing. We're both negotiating um, the inputs and outputs like that.
Yeah.
One person is doing that. That's not necessarily a healthy relationship.
Exactly. Exactly. And
So
so,
that brings
go
up
ahead.
the issue. One of the things we all have to do, have to attend to in relationships is boundaries.
Right.
Boundaries. Again, it's about the self-care. It's not about the other person. It's not about hating on them or judging them. They're going
Hmm.
doing what they're doing because of what they've been through, the path that they're on.
Hmm.
But you have the obligation to do what necessary for you to have a real relationship or to
Excuse
pull
me.
back.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I was about to say. So, for that friendship in particular, I had to pull back from it, and I had to be honest with the person to say, this just doesn't, and that was another note that I wrote down, is being honest when something just doesn't work for you. And to your point, it's not healthy. So I had a conversation with that person to say, hey, I don't have anything against you, and it's not a personal thing. However, I can't be that person for you. I can't be the constant dumping ground for all the things that you're going through. Um, because it's just very uneven. And there's other things going on in my life that I have to attend to as well. So I can't continuously be on the receiving end of that. I don't necessarily, and there's this whole thing that's in the air these days about cutting people off. I don't necessarily cut people off, but I just let people know where I stand. And whatever happens, however they receive that is how they receive it. And what they are able to do with that information is what they'll be able to do. But to your point about boundaries, I'm not going to tell a person, I don't want to talk to you anymore. It's not that, because that's not genuinely how I feel. But I could just let you know where I stand. And if you can't handle that and you need to go to somebody else to get that, then that's the decision that you're making. But I have to let you know where I am,
Well, that's
you know?
actually your input into the relationship. So if
Hmm.
the person can accept that, then you've negotiated another level of interaction.
Yeah.
What I like about what you're saying is you're practicing using that magic word that we have to learn as we mature and become more effective in our lives. No, no. Doesn't mean I don't like you. Doesn't mean I don't have something for you, but something about this is not working for me. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and so so I've so this conversation is just so relevant even for me personally, because within the past year specifically for me, there's been a lot of I don't want to exaggerate it, but then there's been a number of relationships that I've had to reevaluate and to establish some boundaries, to communicate, to make some decisions, because not everything may fit in the way that you desire it to.
mm,
So there may be a specific thing or a specific way that you would like a relationship to operate, but it just may not work. It
mm,
may not work. So there may be people that you want to do business with because you like that person, but you realize business wise, it just doesn't work. So it doesn't mean that we can't be friends. It doesn't mean that we can't communicate. But this specific thing that I'm trying to do, or that we're trying to do with this friendship, it just doesn't work. And maybe it'll work later on.
mm,
But given where I am right now, given where you are right now, it's just not in alignment. And the reality is that's okay,
mm.
because maybe we can circle back and talk about it again a year from now, a couple years from now, a couple months from now. But right now, the way that this thing is going, it's just the timing just doesn't seem to be right. And that's where, to your point, communication is really important. And the openness of communication and people being able to receive things is really important, because if we're able to have a really good conversation about it, both of us can walk away from the situation not having any problem, any issue with each other, not taking offense, because we understand that both of us are coming from a genuine place. But this thing that we're trying to do with this relationship just isn't aligned. It just isn't working.
Mm.
Even if it just isn't working for one person, if the other person can respect that and not take it personally, like, I get where that person is coming from, what they're looking for in this moment, I'm not able to give them.
Mm.
So I have to be okay with the fact that it doesn't work for them, and we may need to do something different or nothing at all. you know. So those were a couple of notes that I had. And the other one, I'll try to walk through it a little bit, is staying away from transactional tendencies, because oftentimes we try to make a relationship a one for one. Okay, I do this for you, you do this for me, and we just go back and forth. But it's a flow. It doesn't always work that way. So you may loan somebody some money, and that's part of your relationship. You loan them some money because that's your friend. It may be a while before that person is in a position to loan you some money. So you loan them some money, they may give it back to you. A couple weeks later, you're in need, but they don't have it. That doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the relationship. It's just not able to be transactional in that way because the person isn't where you were when they needed you. So now you may be in need, but maybe they can't give that to you because they're not there. That's okay. Now, if you feel like you're being taken advantage of, then that's different. But a relationship is not always going to be a one-for-one immediate, I do this for you, and now you do this for me. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Relationships are not about equality. They're about equity.
Equity.
Yeah. So, so again, trust. If the universe has you in relationship with somebody, then it's for a reason, and everybody has something to contribute. But it won't be the same things in the same way, because relationships are complementary. One person is good at this, another person is good at that, and together we cover some area. We complement each other. So, as opposed to judging them because they don't do things the way I do, as quickly as I do it, or whatever. But everybody brings something to the party, and when we're open to it, when we're grounded, we complement each other, and then we increase our capacity collectively.
Yeah. Yep. So those were my notes. So hopefully that all made some sense.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. So this is a very big topic. We just went over a few small things today, and we'll do some more with this. But what I'd like folks to do is just do some reflecting on, where am I developmentally in how I do relationships? What is it that I need, and where areas that I can grow in terms of how I do relationships, starting with my relationships with myself. And there again, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about being in a continual process of growth, so that each one of us can actualize our full potential individually and collectively. So thank you, folks. Give us some time, give us some reflection. And if you have some comments, get to us, and we'll see if we can address them for you. Peace and blessings. Have a good Holy Days season, and we'll check you out soon. Peace.